Lesson 47 is about percent of a number, and we'll be working with percents less than 100% and percents greater than 100%. Now, we've been doing some lessons where we had fractional and decimal parts of a number, and we use that formula, f times of equals is. That formula just helps us think about how to set up our fractional part of a number problems. It just gets us thinking in the right direction, basically. Decimal part of a number, we can just use a descriptive variable d for decimal instead of f for fraction. D times of equals is. And so in percent of a number problems, we could say p over 100 times of equals is. We could write it like that. Now the reason we don't just say p, we write p over 100, is usually when you're talking about percent, you just write it like this, 20%. But really that means a fraction of 20 over 100, right? That's what that percent symbol, that is shorthand for 20 over 100. So if we see 20%, then we just put that 20 in for p, and p over 100 times of equals is. Let's go ahead and do a practice problem. 20% of what number is 310? Well, first of all, we see that it's a percent of a number problem, so let's just go ahead and write our formula down. P over 100 times of equals is. And so we don't know what the what number part is or what the of part is. And so we can write 20, we know our percentage, 20 over 100, 20% of what number, so we could just say times Wn is 310. So we know what that part is. And remember, on these fractional and decimal and percent of a number problems, they'll always give you two of the three parts of that formula. So that's what we have here. We have the percent part and the is part. Now we need to figure out the what number. In these lessons, in lesson 47 on percents, they talk about drawing these diagrams. I don't think it's that important. They say it's important, but I'll go ahead and draw one just to help you think about it. If that helps you, great. If not, then I wouldn't worry about using it. Now, 20% of a number, you're doing 20% of a total. So we don't really know what the total is, but we're going to break it up into two parts. One will be 20%, and the other is 80%. Now we know that 20% of this number is 310, so this region right here is totaling up to 310. But obviously that's not a very big part of the total, so our what number part, we should get a larger number for our answer, larger than 310 anyway. So let's just go ahead and work this problem out, and we need to get rid of that fraction on the left. And so we would multiply both sides by 100 over 20. And so that cancels on the left. On the right, 100 over 20, that would just simplify to a 5. And so we can just do 310 times 5 now. And so we would say, what number is equal to 1550? That's what that equals. And so in our percent diagram, 1550, that's the total. 20% of that was 310. And we could just do 1550 minus 310. That's equal to 1240. That's the other 80% of the total is equal to 1240. Let's do another one. What number is 17% of 300? So we see we have a percent problem here. Let's just write out our formula to help us think about how to set it up. P over 100 times of equals is. Okay, we have been given 17% of 300. That is what number? We could just reread that problem. 17% of 300 is what number? So we're looking for the is part. We don't know that. And so we'll just put what we do know into the formula. 17 over 100 times 300 is equal to is, or what number? We're trying to solve for that. Let's go ahead and draw a diagram. And we know what our total is. Our total is 300 here. Now we're breaking that up into two parts, 17%, and then the other part will be 83%. So let's just go ahead and do the math here. 17 times 300 over 100. We could simplify 300 over 100 to 3 over 1. And so we end up with 17 times 3 over 1, which is just 51. And so that's what our answer is 51. 17% of 300 is 51. And so that would be in that part of that fraction diagram or percent diagram. The other 83% is 249. And we add those up, and that's the total of 300. Look at practice problem C. What number is 125% of 116? Now this one, our percent is greater than 100, but we just do our formula first. We see it's a percent word problem, so we always write this formula down first. P over 100 times of equals is. And that helps us think about where to put the values they've given us. They gave us percent, so even though it's greater than 100, we just write it 125 over 100. 125% of 116, so that would be times 116 is, that's our equal sign, what number? We don't know what number we're trying to find yet. 125% of 116 is what number? Now, that of part, that's always your total. So we know the total is 116, but on this one, our percent is greater than 100. So 125% of 116, that's going to be 116, and then plus another amount. So let's go ahead and solve this for what number, and we have 125 times 116 over 100. You can always change that 125 to over 100 to a decimal. 1.25 times 116, that is equal to 145. And so that's our answer there, is 145. So basically, when we have a percent greater than 100, 116, that's everything. So that's 100%. Now, over here we have 100% and then 25% more. And so that would get us our 145. And so this part is 29. So we can write it like that with the 116 and the 120, or the 29 in there, or we could just put 145 on the inside. And so we just say 145 is 125%. 116, that's 100%. 145 is 125%. Let's do one more problem. Look at D at the bottom there. If 38 is increased by 50%, what is the result? Okay, we see we have a percent problem, so let's just go ahead and write our formula down. P over 100 times of equals is. Now, this is worded a little bit differently than ones that we've been doing, and it says if 38 is increased by 50%. Anytime you see that phrase, increased by a percentage, you need to add 100 to the percentage they've given you, because you're already starting out with the whole. We could draw our diagram here, and our whole, 38, that's 100%. If we increase that by 50%, that means we'll have our whole, and then plus like basically 50%, that would be half of another one, right? So that would be 38, and then plus another 50%. Or if we're just thinking about percentages, 100% plus another 50%. So we do 150 over 100. Of 38, so times 38 equals what number? We don't know what that is. So basically we can just do 1.5 times 38, because 150 over 100 would turn into that decimal, 1.5. 1.5 times 38 is 57. So our answer is 57. And so on our diagram, this other part is equal to 19, because 38 plus 19 would be 57. Try to remember that on these percent problems, the ones that are greater than 100. Whenever you see those words increased by or greater than a certain percentage, then you need to add 100 to the percentage you're given when you do the formula to solve the unknown value. Another way to think about it, just think if maybe you sold 50 candy bars this year, and next year your sales increased 100% from this year. Well, to figure out how many you sold, you wouldn't do 100% times 50. You increased your sales 100%, so you'd add 100 to 100. You'd say 200% over 100 times 50. That would equal 100 candy bars. And I mean, you know that if your sales, if you had a sale of 50 candy bars this year and you increase that by 100% next year, your sales would double, right? So that's why you would do 200% over 100 to get your correct formula. So that phrase, increased by, when you see that, you add 100 to the percentage that is given. Well, that's all for lesson 47.